Eskimos, in maybe Russia or something like that, or near Alaska or something, saying that, I don't think Eskimos live in Alaska, to be fair, but saying that we're going to conquer Washington, as you've said. It really is deep. It's deep.
كن سعيدا كن فريدا عش بفخر في الحياة لا تبالي.
Is, for instance, a non-guided evolutionary process that led to, for example, human being. Yeah? We believe in the first human, we believe in these things. And that, we can't say that is in complete
No, I mean, even the term
contradistinction.
evolution.
Yeah, what I mean with that, we can't say it's in complete contradistinction with science. But what I am saying is that in the most instances, if you take away this whole evolutionary thing, human evolution in particular, if you take that away, in most instances where the Quran talks about naturalistic phenomena, it's usually in contradistinction with the Quran. So it's not contradicting the Quran. Do you get it?
Yeah.
For the most part, almost everything can be reconciled, except for those things. Now we would say that, to put as a qualifier, that science is not the be-all and end-all, in the sense that there is a changing science.
Yeah, I do admit that, because like even the theory out of Africa, now a lot of scientists are saying we might have actually come out or evolved from Europe. So
Right,
like,
so
I can't even.
absolutely.
So what do I trust?
Absolutely.
So
That's
was
a
it
good
fact now, and now it's not a fact?
Excellent. So what you've talked about there is the difference between evolutionists call the out of Africa approach versus the multi-regional hypothesis, yeah? Both of those are evolutionary or biological kind of archaeological theories. So some say that human beings started off in Africa, and some say that actually it's multi-regional. So actually, for basically, some others say that, people in China now, they had common ancestors, for example, with a common ancestor of the human Homo sapien, and then they emerged, the Homo sapien emerged out of that. So as you say, there is not certainty. You can't say there is certainty around this evolutionary thesis, anyways, in every aspect. Now we wouldn't say that everything in evolution we go against. Like, for example, speciation, adaptation, these kinds of things. We don't have really a reason. Microevolutionary changes and these things. We don't have a problem with that.
These are normal. Like every human sees this.
Yeah. For real. So
a tall person married with a tall person, it's bound to happen that the
exactly.
offspring will be tall. That's just normal.
Right.
Like.
But apart from the idea that, so we don't accept, that we are the common ancestor of chimps or apes or anything,
That part I don't see that.
Right.
Evidence.
Apart from this, because we say that human being is special in the sense, is unique, in the sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him with a linguistic ability, with a moral capacity, with a free will choice, all these things which are distinct from the rest of the animal kingdom. So therefore Allah decided to choose him as a standalone. But apart from that, you were talking about embryology. So what's interesting about embryology is the Quranic depiction of embryological stages. If you look at, for example, chapter 23, verses like 10 onwards, or if you look at chapter 22, once again, the beginning of that chapter, and other parts of the Quran, I would say there is a correlation between the Quranic narrative and and the modern scientific narrative. I don't think there is a disparity in the sense that there is, for example, in the biblical discourse. In the biblical discourse, if you look at Job chapter, I think 6, verse 6 or something like this, but someone will correct me, believe me. It talks about human being emerging from like a caudal cheese type substance and these things. So, like cheese, something which resembles cheese. If you look at the Quranic discourse and narrative, I would say that it's something which is both appropriate to that time and understandable today. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's the scientific thing. So we were saying that in science, whenever Allah speaks, He speaks in a way that people of that time can understand, appreciate, and ponder, and people of this time can understand, appreciate, and ponder over. Do you get what I'm saying? So, but generally speaking, some of the evidences of Islam on a base level, we'll say that Islam has many evidences. I would say that I would compartmentalize them into the following. I say that some of the evidences are things that you'd expect from a book. So, for example, as a person, a truth seeker, I would expect that a book that claims to be from God, I would expect it to have, for instance, so no contradictions in it.
Okay, yeah.
I would expect it to be preserved, so that's not been changed, right?
Yeah, okay.
I would expect it to be preserved. I would expect it to be inimitable in a sense, because if anyone can do it, then what's the problem? What's the issue? Yeah. So the Quran has these three challenges. It has what you call the contradiction channel or the falsification test. it has the inimitability challenge, right? And it has the challenge of what's the third thing I said? Preservation. So it says, "Inna nahna nazzalna dhikra wa inna lahu lahafidhun." Certainly we have sent down the book and we will preserve it. So comparative of, and this is why there is scholarship in all those areas, right? That's why if you look at all those three areas that I've talked about, the Quranic text is the only one which has a case to make about these three things. No biblical scholar in their right mind would say that, okay, actually our book has been preserved. Because
scholars say that the book has been changed and
exactly.
manipulated. Yeah.
So with the Quran, such a statement cannot be really made with any certainty from a scholarly perspective. In the academic fields, scholars can make that claim, but it will be, has been, and will continue to be challenged. Do you know what I'm saying? The same thing with the no contradiction challenge. There's lots of people that are going to come out and say, oh, actually, there's this contradiction in the Quran, there's that contradiction in the Quran. But on an academic level, there remains a discourse, a discussion. And we as Muslims will maintain that actually what they think they found a contradiction is not actually a contradiction. So these are some of the expectations. But then you have, I would say, tier 2 kinds of things which you can think about. Things like the predictions of the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay. Because the truth is this, the truth is we cannot predict the future with any certainty.
Yeah? I cannot know when I'm going to die.
Exactly, right? There are certain things that we can only make estimates for, and the future is one of them, because we don't have the information of the future with us, right? So when the Quran makes very daring kinds of predictions of the future, I see this as a serious sign. Yeah. Like, for example, in chapter 30, verses 1 to 6, it says
predictions that other humans couldn't have known.
Absolutely. So, for instance, in chapter 30, verses 1 to 6, it says Alif Lam Mim, ghulibat ar-Rum, that the Romans have been defeated. وهم من بعد غلبهم سيغلبون, and after their defeat they will defeat, i.e. the people that they were the Persians. في بضع سنين, in 3 to 9 years. لله الأمر من قبل ومن بعده ويومئذ يفرح المؤمنون. That this is Allah's affair from beginning to the end, and on that day the Muslims will be rejoicing. Now, if you look at the phraseology in this these verses 1 to 6, you'll find that there are some very daring type challenges. It's saying that one empire will defeat another empire, and if you look at the history of that time, the Roman Empire was on the brink of collapse at that particular time, and it was called a bipolar state. So there was a bipolar international relations, a bipolar state in that. So there was two major states, That's why we know bipolar. It doesn't mean psychological problem. We're talking about two main superpowers, So you had the Persians and the Romans, but the Romans were on the brink of collapse, So for the Quran to make this prediction, right, saying in 3 to 9 years that the Romans will defeat the Persians, and it will happen in a nearby land, and on that day the Muslims will rejoice. This is just one example, right? And it did materialize. And imagine if the primary audience had found that this was not going to be, this did not transpire in the way it did transpire, wouldn't they lose confidence in that? Do you see what I'm saying? It's a huge risk. Imagine if I say this is going to happen, Russia and America are going to go into war. Imagine if I was speaking in 1985, and I said that the Russians are going to defeat the Americans in the Cold War, for instance, some 6 years before the Cold War's end, in a counterfactual history, and saying that the opposite will happen. So what I'm saying to you is that really and truly, and this is just one example. I mean, I've done
so there's many more.
Many examples. So the Prophet, and I've made series about this online as well.
You should call it a prophecy, not a prediction.
I like that. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, you're right. Prophecy. Yeah, I made a series on the prophecies of the Prophet and the Quran, right? And obviously we believe that the Quran and the Sunnah both come from Allah, right? So for instance, things like what lands, Islam will take over, or the Muslims will inhabit, So the Prophet said, and this is in a hadith narrated by Thawban, he said that زُوِيَ لِيَ الْأَرْض, the earth has been projected in front of me. فَرَأَيْتُ مَشَارِقَهَا وَمَغَارِبَهَا, I've seen the eastern parts of it and the western parts of it, and وَإِنَّ أُمَّتِي سَيَبْلُغُ مُلْكُهَا, certainly my people will actually possess this area of the world. مَا زُوِيَ لِي مِنْهَا, what I saw from it that was inhabited. So in other words, he's saying that the earth was projected for me, and he said that there was going to be eastern and western expansion, and that my people, i.e. the Muslims, would possess this area, what was for me projected. Now obviously the expansion of Islam was westward and eastward. If you look at Saudi Arabia, what's now Saudi Arabia on a map, you'll see that the expansion is literally westward and eastward. And then he becomes very more specific in other hadith. So he tells us, yeah, these are other predictions, right? So the hadith of Umar al-Khattab, where it says that there will be Muslims, there will be Arabs, that they're going to yatatawaluna fil bunyan, that they're going to compete for the high buildings, right? And this is happening today. You know, Burj Khalifa and these things. And
There's many more. And
yeah,
there's a video. What video?
I've made a video about the prophecies, and even I would go as far as to say
What
that
should I type?
Mohammed Hijab, prophecies of Quran or
Mohammed
something.
Hijab.
Yeah, I've put it in a playlist. Yeah.
Of Islam.
Yeah, Quran, Islam, something like that, or the Prophet. I can't remember what I named it, to be honest. But the point is, I went through all of these. There's many of them, right? There's literally dozens of them, yeah? I think I've been through at least 40 or 50 in the videos, yeah. And all of them, some of them are really interesting, talking about cars in the future, for instance. Yeah, so I would say that they're talking about cars. And this is some scholars of today say he's talking about cars, because the Prophet told us there's going to be a time where people are going to be riding on these things, yeah? These
That's
suruj.
amazing, though. How could anyone know that there
Exactly.
were cars at that time?
Yeah, and he talked about basically these things that will resemble ships, like Roman ships, that will be gliding on the actual land, yeah? And inside of them there'll be leather, reclinable seats. Leather, this is exactly the word, yeah, jild. Leather reclinable seats, and there will be people that will come out of it, women that will have unusual hairstyles, right? That will come out of it outside of the masajid. This is the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, right? And this is all on the thing.
Can you name a few more?
I'll name a few more. So
Like the prophecies in the future.
yeah.
Yeah.
When the
So-
girl said about this is Qasr Ahmed, and it wasn't a palace at that time. Now it just became.
This is good, but I need to look into the asanid of these ones. But the ones I've looked at and I know, for instance, looking at we talked about the country spreading, right? But the Prophet specified very specific things. Like for instance, he
Yeah, like, are
specified.
there any other technological prophecies?
Yeah, technological ones. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, some people. There's a hadith of. This is really a point of note. Yeah, a hadith that's narrated in Tabarani's book. Yeah, he's got 3 books. I think it's the Kabir one. Yeah, it's the big one. Now this is, to be fair, narrated by Ibn Mas'ud with a sanad daif. Some people say that there's some weakness in the chain. So I have to make that clear. No. Yeah, the waqa yuqawi. Yeah, so you could say that the reality. Some say that Ibn Mas'ud was talking to the Prophet, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said there will be a time where there will be the atbaq is gonna yatawasal al-atbaq. Yeah. Yeah, and also so what does this mean? It means that this atbaq, and I looked into there's no commentary on this. I tried to find the sharh of this. No, I'm not talking about a commentary of the present day. I'm talking about, I was trying to look for the old school ones, yeah? And I couldn't find any. But here really, atbaq, they're trying to say that it's satellites, yeah? And that they will communicate with each other. But Allahu A'lam. If it means this, I've seen some commentaries say it's talking about there'll be different socio-economic groups and hierarchies, and there will be. But anyways,
It says تتطابق الأطباق وتنقطع الأرحام.
تواصل الأطباق.
تتواصل
يتواصل الأطباق. ينقطع الأرحام. انقطاع الأرحام is definitely sahih, because it's not just in this hadith. It's strong. انقطاع الأرحام means when people will be basically broken off. And the same hadith, by the way, was talking about the growth of homosexuality. It says ويكتفى الرجل بالرجل والمرأة بالمرأة. So that the man is going to be satisfied with the man, and the woman will be satisfied with the woman. In other words, there won't need to be heterosexuality. They'll be satisfied with a homosexual status quo. In other words, some of them. Yeah. So that's in the same hadith as Daif, but it's interesting because that's what it's saying. But then the Prophet said many things about the future, about like what's going to happen to, for example, diseases. It's going to spread because of sexually. He actually mentioned that zina, which is extramarital sex or premarital sex, will increase STDs basically. STDs. And
They are
subhanAllah,
increasing, especially among the
No doubt.
homosexual community. There's a high STD rate among the gay man.
it's true that WHO
You
said
can
that
look this
they've.
up.
Yeah, WHO said that I think it's 15 times more likely. At any rate, I mean,
Not
No.
likely, they actually have it.
yeah, that's what
actually have the
that's what
disease.
they said. But at any rate, it's happening everywhere, right? It's not just with homosexuals, it's happening with, or even with heterosexuals. But the reason why is clearly because of hip-hopping around and not committing to certain partners, etc. So that's caused this epidemic, you could say, or pandemic. So these are, it depends. Epidemic, because I think it is happening maybe globally now. So these are some of the predictions of the Prophet. Constantinople, which is Istanbul presently, the Prophet said that will be conquered. And if you really think about that, as a standalone thing, it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting because...
You know, how could have the Prophet Muhammad, it just begs the question, how could he have known that with such a small army, say, making a challenge and saying the Muslims will conquer Constantinople? That would be like saying the Muslims will conquer Washington.
Exactly. But even less, it'll be more absurd than that.
Small army of slaves and...
I was actually reading an Orientalist book one time. It's saying that because the early Islam was like 30 or 40 people, a lot of these prophecies were done in Mecca. Do you know, in Mecca, the time where the Prophet didn't even have a base, they didn't even live in Medina, So for there to be a band of people, 30, 40, 50 people, and for the leader of those people to predict that I'm going to take over basically the empire of the day, is equivalent to some Eskimos, in maybe Russia or something like that, or near Alaska or something, saying that, I don't think Eskimos live in Alaska, to be fair, but saying that we're going to conquer Washington, as you've said. It really is deep. It's deep.
You must definitely have some kind of proof to make such a daring claim.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because when you look at figures of history that claim to predict the future, Nostradamus, it's really interesting because even W.H. Wells, who was a writer in England, he tried to predict a couple of... He was living in the Industrial Revolution himself. I think he was born in 1869 or something. If you look at even the what do you call it, Jehovah's Witnesses, they said that there was going to be the end of the world in 1977, and when it didn't happen, they call it the Great Depression. It's very risky predicting the future. It's very risky predicting the future. So when we have a range of different prophecies here talking about the future, we would say that this is a strong evidence for the case of Islam. Now, obviously, we would say also the linguistic composition of the Quran, the intertextuality of the Quran, the knitted togetherness of the Quran, the structural coherence of the Quran, all of that also is evidence. But that's just in a nutshell what I would say the evidence of is.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. I can't just take your word, obviously, for it. So I'll have to look that up and see the evidence for it. But like even just making that claim, like satellites and cars and skyscrapers like those, it just begs the question: how did he know this stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. How did he know?
How did you know with that little technology and? What about embryology though? You didn't really.
So embryology. So the Quran mentions stages,
Yeah.
The stages of the Quran. So first of all, you have nutfa. Okay, you have nutfa. The Quran mentions nutfa, in many different parts. Nutfa means a sperm drop. No, a sperm drop.
Okay.
So the human being started from a sperm drop.
Yeah.
In chapter 76, verse 2, it says nutfatin amshajin. So which means it's intermingled drop. And then when you look at those chapters, those verses that I talked to you about in Surah Al-Mu'minun and in Surah Al-Hajj, it talks about first nutfa, then alaqa, then mudgha, then idam, then fakasawna al-idam al-lahma. And then after that we've clothed the bones with what do you call it? With muscle, you could say. However, this is not necessarily, as I've explained in the video, 100% chronological, so it doesn't necessarily need to be ordered. And there's a hadith of the Prophet, for example, one narrated by Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, same person has narrated the hadith about the thing, and this is a sahih hadith, authentic. إن أحدكم ليكون في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون مضغة بعد ذلك ثم يكون علقة بعد ذلك. That certainly one of you guys is going to be in your mother's womb for 40 days as a nutfa, and then as a alaqa, then as a mudgha. So here
Prophet Muhammad being an illiterate man, not even like a doctor at that time.
Yeah, exactly. So he couldn't have known these things. In fact, there's some really interesting things, right? Because there's some other hadith, and this was mentioned in that series I've done, that talk about the gender of the baby being kind of understood at the time of like 40 days as well. So there are some really interesting overlaps between basically what he
So
was
it's the
said, and
same-
it's the same kind of thing. A lot of it is the same as what we've discovered today in terms of modern day embryology. You couldn't say there's a major disparity. What you could say
And
is,
we know all of these things with technology.
yeah. So all these things that we know today about embryology is not disparate from that which is mentioned in the Quranic and Hadith discourse in this field. I would say. I would argue in this field it's not. In things like human evolution, the thesis of it or some of the assumptions of it, I would say is disparate. Yeah, but not in this. So this is why I said that if in terms of religion, the closest ancient religion to the scientific discourse of today is Islam. But it cannot be and it shouldn't be a perfect correlation. And had it been a perfect correlation, the fact that science is changing, Jazakumullah khairan, thank you very much. Huh? Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. It's from McDonald's though, yeah? I don't usually go to McDonald's, you know, just to let you know. But I'm going to drink it because it's good to accept a gift from the brothers. But, you know, McDonald's, I don't go there, just to let you guys know. Huh? No, just there. Yeah, so, do you get what I'm saying? So science is changing. There is a changing scientific narrative. Which
But the scientific things that we observe, like embryology, that's not really going to change.
Well, that could change because actually those things that we observe, like observations and theories, can sometimes, for example, me and you can observe a vase smashing onto the floor.
Yeah.
We can make that same observation, but how we come to actually analyze the reasoning behind it smashing on the floor could be different. That's why you had Newtonian physics, Jazakallah khairan, and you had Einsteinian physics, both of which were attempts to try and explain the gravitational pull, or in the case of Einstein, pull. But so that's why you have different models, you know, scientific models which can change according to time and place. So I would say that there shouldn't be, and this is why I always do recommend. If not looking at the whole book, just looking at the thesis of Thomas Kuhn, who talked about structures and scientific evolution. Because he talks about how, he talks about how science, actually sometimes there can be paradigm shifts. He calls them paradigm shifts.
Yeah, but there is, we observe that.
Yeah. So, but generally speaking, I think the case for Islam, if you look at all of the evidences provided, is very, very powerful.
I'll have to look at your video, Mohammed Hijab, Prophecies of Islam.
I hope so. I hope so. I've got it on a playlist.
I'll contact you as well if I have
Inshallah.
like a
I'll
problem.
give you my number. Have you got any questions now to ask?
Yeah, also, some Muslim here say that Muhammad is prophesied in the Bible.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I would argue that he is prophesied in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because if you look at Isaiah 42,
Yeah.
for example, looking at that whole chapter, it's talking about people coming to the people of Kedar.
Okay, so can you read that now? Can you read it?
The
now?
whole of, okay, I'll tell you what the part is, because there's, like, I think it's about 30 different verses, yeah? But,
Do you
yeah.
have internet now on your phone? Or?
Yeah, so can someone get particularly verse 11, because I think that's the most important verse, yeah?
Just read the whole verse and so I
Okay,
can
let's
make a judgment.
read it. I think he's right. We'll read it.
When it's too cold, my phone doesn't work.
Right, Isaiah 42.
Isaiah 32 prophesies Muhammad's coming, like an arrival.
42, yeah. And other places, like for example, Isaiah 29:12, yeah? Isaiah 29:12 says that it will be said to him, i.e. this prophet that's going to come in the future, yeah? Read, and he will say, I'm not of the learned, or I cannot read. And this, of course, is the Islamic narrative, that some...
Learned meaning he's illiterate.
Yeah, so I cannot read. So basically, in Isaiah 29:12, it says that it will be said to him, read, and he'll say, I cannot read. And this is exactly the story of Prophet Muhammad, because we say that what happened with Prophet Muhammad is that an angel came to him and he revealed to him the message of Islam in a cave called Ghar Hira in present-day Saudi Arabia. Yeah, so he went there to kind of meditate about things, and then an angel came to him to give him the same message that was given to all of those people before. No, not that one. Go to 42, because I've already told you. Yeah, so this is 29:12, just for the camera and for you. Okay, it will be said to him, read this, please. He will answer, I don't know how to read. Yeah. This is Isaiah 29:12, yeah? And this is exactly in correlation with what the Islamic narrative is. Where he says, Iqra, that the angel says to him, Iqra, and then he says, Ma ana biqari'in. I'm not of the learned. I cannot read. Sorry, I can't read.
Yeah.
So this exactly is mentioned in Isaiah 29:12. Now looking, because 29:12, Isaiah is a part of the Old Testament, which some say Isaiah himself was a prophet who wrote it. Some say, because I was looking at... Pardon?
Speak up, please.
Speak up. Okay, I'll try. Sorry. So
Don't worry, bro. You can listen to it on the
online. Some say that. Do you get it? So some say in regards to Isaiah 42. Can we get Isaiah 42 out? Isaiah 42. If you read it, because this is interesting. If you look at the scholarship, because I looked at the Jewish scholarship and the Christian scholarship on this. Obviously, most Christians say it's Jesus Christ. Yeah, that this person that is talking about is Jesus. Yeah, and Jews say actually it's Isaiah himself, or it's talking about the Messiah at the end of days. Yeah. Okay. So let's read Isaiah 42. It's really interesting. It says, "Hear my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations." Obviously, here, interesting point is nations, right? Whereas we know from the Deuteronomy discourse that Moses and people like him were sent for their people, the children of Israel, right? So this is talking about someone who comes to an international. Yeah. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. And this is interesting because the Prophet gave that exact advice, and that advice is given in the Quran. Don't shout too much, don't because the worst of voices is the braying of the horses. Yeah. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. So once again, talking about the international message, because on earth, it's talking about the whole earth, right? And he's teaching the islands, once again, more than one island, will put their hope. This is what God, the Lord, says. The creator of the heavens, who stretches them out, who spreads out the earth with all that springs from it, who gives breath to its people, and life to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles. Now, it's really interesting now, because Jesus in Matthew's and Mark as well says, do not go in the way of the Gentiles. For I was only sent for the lost sheep of Israel. For a Christian now, they can't make the claim that this is talking about Jesus for one reason, this one reason, yeah? But let's continue reading. It says, to open the eyes that are blind. By the way, there's a verse in chapter 7 of the Quran, verse 157. Do you know what it says? It says, الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل يأمرهم بالمعروف وينهاهم عن المنكر. The ones that follow, so the Jews and Christians that follow the prophet, the illiterate one, so that they find written in their Torah and the Injil. يأمرهم بالمعروف وينهاهم عن المنكر ويحل لهم الطيبات ويحرم عليهم الخبائث. That he makes halal for them. In other words, he tells them about that which is permissible and he tells them that which is bad for you. ويضع عنهم أسرهم والأغلال التي كانت عليهم. Yeah? Yes. والأغلال التي كانت عليهم. And he unties for them, yeah, the locks that they were entrapped in. In other words, it's figurative that they will be freed by his message, right? But listen to what it says here. And release them from the dungeons, those who sit in darkness. Now the dungeon here, so the Quran says in chapter 7 verse 157 that they'll be freed from the prisons, or they'll be freed from their chains. Here it's saying about this prophet that they will be released from their dungeons. So in other words, they'll be made free. The same message is being given exactly. This is Isaiah 42. It says, I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not yield my glory to another or praise to idols. See the former things that have taken place and the things I declare before they spring into being. I announce them to you. Now listen to this. This is the part here. Sing to the Lord a new song, his praise from the ends of the earth. You who go down to the sea and all that is in it. You islands and who live in them. Let the wilderness and its towns raise their voice. Let the settlements where Kedar lives rejoice. Now Kedar is the Arabs, according to the biblical narrative. Now there's no difference of opinion now among the biblical scholars that Kedar refers to Arab people. Okay. Now clearly, and Kedar in itself is the Arabian Peninsula. Yeah? So here really and truly the question is, how could we say that this is Jesus, right? It couldn't be Jesus because he didn't come to the Arabs. And he didn't come to the people of Kedar, did he?
Yeah.
Right?
Came to the lost sheep of Israel.
let the people of Sela sing for joy. Now, Sela is very specific because Sela, can you see here,
Yeah.
is actually a mountain range, yeah? A mountain range in Medina. Until this day, there are actually mountains in Medina called Sala.
That was the old name of Salah, right? The mountain range. That's
Yes.
the old name.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why in Hebrew, this is what it's called, Sela, yeah?
Okay.
Now, also what's interesting is that in the book of Psalms, you'll find Sela being mentioned as well.
Yeah.
And in the book of Psalms in the Bible, it refers to Sela in conjunction with pilgrimage. And we know that the house of Abraham was narrative.
Yeah.
And in the same book of Psalms, it talks about Becca, which is another name for Mecca. And the Quran mentions Mecca and Becca in conjunction with each other.
Yeah. Do you have any video regarding this matter? Like
I had a discussion with a Jewish man.
full video?
Yeah, with a Jewish man about this.
Okay.
He had a red beard. He was a Zionist. He called himself a Zionist. And so I had a discussion with him. We had two discussions. One was about Palestine, Israel, and this, that. And this one was another one. So we had that discussion. But the point is this. Like a warrior, he will stir up his zeal. Now, we know Jesus wasn't a warrior. That's what Christians love to tell us. So, okay, you want to say he was a warrior? Like a warrior, yeah? With a shout, he will raise the battle cry. So there will be some kind of battle that will be happening. And we know that that definitely happened historically. There was battles between Muslims and non-Muslims. And he will triumph over his enemies. And this is a prophecy in the Bible, yeah? Talking about the Prophet Muhammad. And no one can deny that he triumphed over his enemies. No one can deny that he took over the Arabian Peninsula. No one can deny that. And that's why Islam was able to spread in the way it did. For a long time, I've kept silent. I've been quiet and held myself back. But now, like a woman in childbirth, I'll cry out, I gasp and pant. I will lay waste the mountains and hills and dry up their vegetation. I will turn rivers into islands and dry up the pools, etc., etc., yeah? But it's interesting, yeah? Because I will not forsake, at the end it says, I will not forsake them. But those who trust in idols, who say to images, you are gods, will be turned back in utter shame. And obviously we know when the Prophet went into Mecca, he turned all the idols upside down, he broke them all, and he brought Tawheed. He brought Tawheed forward, which is monotheism. Whose is this? I don't see how this can apply to anyone except for the Prophet Muhammad. So
when it refers to the Arabian Peninsula.
yeah, there's no other person that came to the Arabian Peninsula, to that region of the Arabian Peninsula, that claimed to be a prophet, that triumphed over his enemies, that claimed to spread justice, and to, in the minds of many millions, did spread justice, and fulfills this prophecy. So this is extra Quranic information, because here we're coming out of the Quran, but it fulfills the meta-narrative, because the meta-narrative is that the Quranic meta-narrative is that the previous dispensations, like the Torah and the Injil, which is the Gospels, they were revealed, but then they were corrupted. But that you can find still now things within those books which indicate to the forthcoming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's why it says يَجِدُونَهُ مَكْتُوبًا عِنْدَهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاةِ وَالْإِنْجِيلِ. They find him now. You can find him now. Yeah, يَجِدُونَهُ in Arabic is like present day.
Yeah.
It's مضارع, فعل مضارع, which means it's a present tense form of the verb. They find him in their Torah and their Injil. Even now, they find him in those books. Yeah? يَأْمُرُهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ يَنْهَاهُمْ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. So here, the point is that the evidences are quite overwhelming when you look at it from that perspective. And they're not just Quranic evidences. If you look at the whole corpus, we feel like there's a strong case throughout. Any questions on that?
Is there another verse regarding Kedar? I think there's another verse as well.
There is. I think there are many verses regarding Kedar. I think there's some in Genesis even that talk about basically Ismail being the progeny of Ismail being the people of Kedar. Ismail obviously being one of the sons of Abraham, Ishmael, and his people being the Arabs. So it indicates that, and that's why the biblical scholars have taken that out and have said that, okay, that means it's the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah.
Say again?
What's the verse you said in the Bible where they mentioned Medina Salah?
Which one, sorry?
The one that mentions the mountains that are carved out of rocks in Medina. Salah, the Medina Salah.
Yeah, Salah. Yeah, so this is mentioned Isaiah 42, yeah. So if you go like verses 11, 12, 13, you'll see the mountains of Salah mentioned.
I think there's another verse in the Bible as well where it says Muhammad is going to migrate to another city. I forgot what that
Yeah, so have I. I need to look into that myself. It could be. I don't know. I have to look into that.
It's gonna migrate to Yathrib or something.
Yathrib is the name of Medina. Like it was the name of Medina before it changed into being Medina.
Yeah. But there's one verse like that as well.
Yeah, we'll try and look for it. Maybe someone here knows. Adnan is quite good with these things, so if we find him, we can ask him. Is Adnan here? Is he there today? Alright, we'll ask him. Adnan is good with this kind of biblical stuff. Anything else?
Because Kalam was in one of the videos, he was challenging the prophecy about Muhammad in the Bible. He was saying the Prophet Muhammad does not belong to Kedar's progeny. Is that true?
Well, no, because as we said, he's an Arab.
Kedar is
We have the exact lineage of Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
But the truth is, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, now some people link it all the way back to Kedar. The truth, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah mentions in a book of his that the highest we have is Adnan. Adnan is the name of the highest person we have in the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad. But we know that Prophet Muhammad goes all the way back to Ismail. We know that. But we know, in terms of what we know for sure, we know the progeny from Adnan, this man called Adnan, up until the Prophet Muhammad, which is, we're talking about 20 names in between.
I'd like to ask him as well.
Yeah,
Adnan,
for sure.
about this.
His name is Adnan, yeah, that's right. It's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's Adnan. Not this Adnan, I was talking about Adnan, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Do you know about Jabal al-Luz in Saudi Arabia? Apparently it's the real Mount Sinai. Have you ever heard about that?
No, I haven't
It's a
looked into that.
theory. I've heard some Jewish scholars. They went there
Yeah.
and they said like on the top of the mountain is black.
Yeah?
They said that's where the lightning struck. And
No, I've not seen that.
You
I've
should
always,
check it out.
I've always,
Jabal al-Luz in Saudi Arabia is the real Mount Sinai.
but the brother here, I'm giving him priority because he's inquiring about Islam. If there's anything more you want me to answer,
No, I think what you said is enough.
yeah?
I'll have to just research it.
Research it more and come to me, inshallah, and ask me any questions.
Yeah,
Maybe not next week, the week after that, yeah? 'Cause I might not be here next week.
where are you going?
I don't know, I'll have to keep that off air. Otherwise we'll find
I'm going to
something.
join ISIS.
Astaghfirullah.
I'm joking.
Anyways, it was a pleasure talking to you, man.
I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. Nice one, take care, man. Guys, unstrap me. Yeah.
يا ديمة خير وعطاء ويمام نقاء وسخاء يا نجما شع فأبهجنا يا شعلة نور وضاء يا ديمة خير وعطاء ويمام نقاء